Hello, romance lovers. Today's story is called Give Me That Pacifier. If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories. Hela was told that the Senate had made a decision and that the Senate's decision would not please her, since she would be expelled. This greatly surprised the girl, and she was disappointed. The man told the main character that her research was too dangerous, and moreover, the girl was causing indignation among many. The woman herself did not understand what was being discussed, because she had once picked up this guy when he was living on alms. And it was thanks to her that he got his position, since the main character taught him magic. The main character was shocked to hear accusations that the number of those frightened by her disorderly actions was increasing. Gela asked again about her expulsion. Gela was shocked that this guy really didn't know what gratitude was. The man warned the main character, saying that if she obediently accepted their decision, they would not kill her. The magic heart with magic would be destroyed, but the guy will do everything in his power so that Gela can live out her life in peace. The main character was shocked by such impudent behavior. Gela understood that he was simply suggesting that she live like an ordinary old woman. The girl screamed, wondering if they had gone mad or if they thought she was nuts. The main character did not understand how Milan even dared to say such a thing, because it was she who founded this kingdom of magicians, Silofia. Gela began to stomp her feet on the floor. The men tried to calm her down, and Melon said that he had given her a chance and hoped that it would not come to this. The main character was immediately grabbed and began to be tied with chains, but the girl understood that she was still able to break them with magic. But suddenly, Gela first realized that her mana was exhausted, and therefore she could not break them. Gela shouted Melen's name. The man in turn only asked if she recognized what had ended her with her spell. Melen said that he had already warned that what Gela was doing was truly dangerous for the world, and the girl's very existence was dangerous. The man took the staff in his hands and ordered her to get ready. Gela understood that they would definitely get rid of her, while the men were reading their prayers. The main character understood that a couple of days ago they would not have been able to do this, and most likely they were bribed quite recently. They say that when a person is exhausted from hunger, his throat dries up. The back of Gela's head was pulsating so much that she could feel the blood flowing. It was all very pathetic for the main character, because only yesterday she was laughing, drinking with this bastard. The main character started a family with her first student. The guy was both a friend and a colleague with whom they learned about life and death. For Gela, Melen was the only thing that mattered. Gela began to notice that a magic wheel and magic of complete disappearance had appeared around her. The girl understood that the Melen intended to erase all traces of her existence. Not only her body, but her soul and mana as well. The main character felt very strange because Melen got rid of her by suppressing her with a mana-controlling circle that she herself created. The girl asked how he could do that. The man didn't answer, and Gela began to smile because even now he was silent and no one was thinking about saving her or at least sympathizing with her. The girl resigned herself to the fact that this was apparently her fate, and suddenly an explosion was heard, and the men turned to the high priest with shouts. Gela shouted with a smile that she cursed Melen and would never forgive him for this. And if she returned to Earth as an undead, she would personally finish him off. And if after some time the main character is reborn, then the one who devalued her merits and took away her life will be only Melen. Melen said that the girl had no mana left and would do nothing, because she had become the useless and powerless ones she once looked down on. Gela was outraged because he was making her out to be a villain. The man added that it seemed that black magic would not help when the mana disappeared. It was very unpleasant to understand that the head of the kingdom, the greatest sorceress Gela Silofia, was dying like this. Melen said goodbye to the girl. The main character did not understand how he could say goodbye so brazenly, as if she was nothing to him. The girl simply turned into dust. Quite a while has passed since Gela wandered in the darkness, and she feels that her spirit is floating without flesh. Suddenly, Gela saw the light and began to understand that she would most likely go to heaven or hell. The main character was willing to accept any shelter, and it would be even better for her to be reborn. Opening her eyes, the girl saw a large chandelier from above. She did not understand where the chandelier came from in the afterlife and why everything was so high. Gela's first guess was that giants lived there. When the girl decided to look around, she saw her hand and noticed that it was somehow short. Suddenly, the girl heard a sound, and she assumed that someone was talking to her and that someone started screaming. The main character felt very slow and she could not pronounce a word because she was like a child. And finally, the girl realized that she really is a child. Gela slowly began to understand that she had been reborn. But she still doubted it, because then she would not have memories of her past life. The girl decided that most likely she had simply managed to miraculously survive, and now she simply could not move because of her wounds. The girl noticed that the maid was staring at her and did not understand why. Looking closely at the maid, the main character noticed that she had a very huge face, and it was very unusual for her. The maid put a pacifier in the girl's mouth and noticed that it was quite noisy. After that, Gela began to understand that she had become a baby, and now she was a child, because she could neither move nor speak. The maid waved the bed linen, and the baby began to cough and sneeze because there was a lot of dust. The main character did not understand who could treat a child like that, because she believed that everyone she met coddled babies. Gela was shocked that someone was not aware of how valuable children with mana were. The girl tried to move and turn around, but her body did not obey at all, because she was a child. But the main character had hope that after death she would be able to live a life of pleasure at least in hell. But this weak, clumsy body was all that Gela received. The girl simply did not understand how this could happen. The baby instinctively began to cry, but immediately decided to pull herself together, because first she needed to calmly think everything over. Gela understood that no matter how she felt about it, she didn't newborn. And judging from this phenomenon is not considered reincarnation, but simply a change of body. The little girl didn't understand where she was and why the room was so empty. Suddenly, the main character heard the maid talking to someone and complaining that she was sitting with her mother this week. Gela heard her speak and assumed it was the imperial language. The maid said the child was a half-breed. And now the main character noted that the accent was like on the outskirts, and the Empire of Hiron came to her mind. But Gela decided for herself that the main thing is that she is alive and remembers her past life. At first, the little girl's head was a mess, but now she is already thinking clearly. The main character hoped that she would not have to sit in this small prison for years. The girl tried in every way to attract the attention of the maid so that she would let her out of the stroller. The maid did not respond to her, and this made the child very angry. Suddenly, the main character thought about the fact that she could use mana. She wanted to check it out. The pose in which she did it looked strange, but she still succeeded. It was a real relief because she can do magic. The vase fell and broke because of the main character's magic, and the maid did not understand why the vase fell. Gela thought about it and realized that it didn't seem like her magic had run out. It was just that the baby's body was making it hard for her to control, but she would soon get used to it. The main character decided that first she would find out where she was and then run away, and after the escape she would return to Solofia and take revenge. When the little girl started trying to get up, she couldn't do anything. Gela didn't understand why her legs and arms were so weak, and assumed that she was probably 10 months old. She understood that there would be no revenge with such success. The maid was disappointed because she couldn't do anything today. The main character was thinking about her return to Silofia. She decided that it was pointless to go right now, and it seemed like she could forget about immediate revenge. Gela was upset because she didn't want to just lie there, so she decided to try Manu again. And the girl succeeded again. The magic stretched from the bed to the ceiling, and the main character felt like the magic would run out if she relaxed even a little. And if Gela relaxes, she will kiss her head on the floor. The baby jumped out of bed with the help of her magic and decided to try to quickly get away from here and figure out what is where. The main character's knees hurt a lot because she was crawling on the floor and there was not a single carpet nearby. Gela thought that they had no respect for the child. Turning to the side, the maid noticed that the baby had gotten out and did not understand how this had happened. The main character was very upset, and the maid continued to ask herself how she was able to fall out of bed, because for such a small child, it is quite difficult. On her way to the bed, the little girl saw herself in the mirror and noticed that she had silver eyes. After thinking for a while, she realized that she only remembered one family in the Hiron Empire who had silver eyes. The maid was outraged that she could not even move away. The woman put the baby in the bed and said that she was busy, so she should sleep. The main character tried to remember the family name who had silver eyes. Suddenly, the girl began to fall asleep, and having perked up a little, she realized that she wanted to remember something. But the pacifier was very calming to her, and so she had to take it in her mouth. A month has passed since the main character has been living in this prison for the disadvantaged. Gela has stopped her useless resistance, and they are still watching her. But something has been found out during all this time, and it has helped to find answers to some questions. The first thing Gela found out was that the maids for her changed every week, and most of the time no one needed her because they were trying to avoid working here, disgusted by the child. Talking to the maids won't work either. Even when they feed the girl, they want to make her drink faster so as not to waste their time. These women have enough other things to worry about, so they just feed the child and leave him for 4 or 5 hours, depending on the situation. And the second thing the girl managed to find out is that for some reason she has to avoid the old chewed thing so as not to pass out. The pacifier was all dirty, but if she didn't take it out, the main character would sleep like a marmot. Gela realized this after 3 blackouts. And the third is that she is most likely with the hereditary Duke Chiron. There are many legends about this empire, but among them there is also one about a mysterious family with silver eyes. One day, a beautiful silver-haired creature descended from heaven and fell in love with a human, and they had a child. To his surprise, the child was born with silver eyes, which did not exist in the human world. Since then, it is said that their descendants had children with such eyes as if the blood of paradise flows in them. Later, one of the silver-eyed made a great contribution to the foundation of the empire. The first emperor respected that man very much and listened to him. Therefore, he was granted various privileges as a nobleman and the title of crowned. And the fourth is the question of who this girl is. Judging by the main character's suspicions, her current body is somehow related to the Duke's family, and she is not a commoner, but her birth was most likely unwanted. The baby is not even 10 months old. The maids say that the girl is a half-breed, so she is most likely unwanted and unnecessary. The main character did not want to believe that she was the daughter of the tyrant Charante. Gela did not like this at all, and she did not want to be here at all. Until the very end, the girl proved to herself that this could not be, and would like to hear that the eldest Duc de Char does not sympathize with the female sex, because he is not yet mature enough for this. Well, in general, the little girl hates Charante. Especially if the rumors about the family's love are true, then there is a 1 in 1,000 chance that she and Charante are siblings. The little girl didn't want to live in this den, but in order to escape from here, she needed a body suitable for magic and a large part of mana and everything. So the girl could only emit magic with her whole body. The main character decided for herself that when she gets out of here, she will look for an orphanage that will not hold her back, because such an institution is the only way out not to feel weak and not to regret anything. Gela knew that the Dukes could not be defeated by brute force, and besides, no sorcerer could defeat them. They constantly bullied Solofia and started wars more than once. They say that the Dukes in the castle have many military secrets, and the little girl wanted to find out something and then leave with the information. She decided that she would start exploring the entire castle today, and to begin with, she would like to wash this nasty pacifier that she had to suck on all the time. The main character needed to find a place where she could wash her pacifier. The baby crawled around the estate and looked for a place to wash it, but the estate was so huge. Gela knew that with such a small body, she would be exploring the mansion for a long time. But the pacifier fit so well in her mouth that it helped her to some extent. The girl didn't think she would be so happy with the pacifier at her age. The girl looked around and really wanted to wash the pacifier, because the level of dirt was simply unbearable. Suddenly, Gela looked in the other direction and saw a fountain there. The main character decided that she would wash herself there. Gela reached the fountain with great difficulty and was upset because she did not expect it to be so high. Thoughts about going back began to creep in, but Gela had already climbed so far that she did not want to. The main character decided to try to reach. The little girl stood up and tried to reach with difficulty, but she almost succeeded. Desher Clown, the head of the clown family, asked Kant what was going on. The man bowed and told the head that it was a child. These words outraged Deshar because he himself knew this. Deshar turned to Kant and asked what the child was doing there. The man was angry because he did not understand how he could not keep an eye on his own child. Kant said that it was quite possible, because this child was the daughter of the deceased master. The Duke was very surprised when he realized that it was Valian's daughter, because he thought she was a baby. The Duke did not understand what this little girl was doing here. Charante came into the room and asked his father what he was doing here. It was the heir of the clown family, Charante Clown. The boy turned towards the fountain and asked his father who it was. The man said it was his late brother's child. Charante was surprised and now knew what it looked like. It was a child that some woman had given birth to from Valian after he left them. He couldn't even take care of himself and died. Only the child returned to the palace. Charente noted that if the child was here, it meant that the maids had failed in their duties. The maid who stood next to them was frightened. The Duke asked Charente to control his strength. The boy was surprised and asked if his father had become softer. The man sighed and said that Charente had become more sarcastic. Meanwhile, the main character tried to wash the pacifier, but realized that she couldn't reach it because those short arms prevented her from doing so. Even if Gela tried for hundreds of days, nothing would come of it. The main character decided to use magic to throw the pacifier. The girl tried, but realized that she could not focus on magic when she was standing. Gela was outraged that she could cast a spell in that shameful pose. The main character understood that she would have to lie down on the ground in broad daylight. She was very worried that someone might see it. The baby didn't know what to do. Gela didn't understand why she was constantly making these strange sounds. The girl was very tired and decided to sit down, taking the pacifier to her mouth. Looking to the side, she saw Deschar and Charente clown. Now everything was clear. And the main character's assumptions that she lived in the clown estate were true. Since they haven't changed much, we can conclude that not much time has passed since the death of the main character. Gela was pleased with herself because she didn't use magic after all, because if they saw her pose, it wouldn't be very good. Charente Crown really irritated the main character. The guy was smart and successful, and moreover, he had a great command of magic. Gela met him when she was 16 and realized that he ignored those who were not at his level and was only in the company of aristocrats. Dealing with Deschar Clown is even more difficult. He repeatedly refused Gela by correspondence, so much so that the main character delayed her answer each time in order to calm down before the next meeting. In this way, Gela compensated for her lack of experience. Only in this way could the girl stand up to him. Gela so desperately defended her dear country. But this time, the main character decided that victory would be hers, because no one would be able to resist her if Gela caught them by surprise. Charente turned to the maid and said that she seemed in no hurry to take the child into the room and continued to stand like a pillar. The maid ran up to the young miss. The main character looked at the men and realized that they were the same cowardly bastards. Seeing the maid running towards her, Gela began to run away because her nipple was still dirty. The maid asked the miss not to run away. The main character understood that if she continued to suck on this dirty pacifier, she would definitely get sick. Charente told her father that the child looked like a cockroach. The father was very surprised and opened his mouth. Charente noted that his father had let it all go to such an extent that his father simply asked him to be quiet. The boy grinned and asked his father if he understood that this half-breed would not bear the name Clown. The young heir said that even the thought of this creature inheriting their blood filled him with horror. Deschar said that he knew this perfectly well without him reminding him. The maid continued to run after the girl. Hela thought the maid was a complete fool for thinking that she wouldn't run away just because she asked. The main character was in a hurry because she couldn't suck that dirty pacifier anymore. The maid finally caught the baby. The maid said that she got it, scolding because of Miss and was not happy. Gela was upset and shaking because she ran as fast as she could, but she was still caught. It was very annoying. Gela was definitely dead now. The baby was lying in her crib sucking her finger. She was still making baby noises. The maid was glad because Miss had been very quiet lately. The maid stuck a pacifier in the baby's mouth so that she would suck on it and be quiet. The maid talked to herself about how loud the baby was and was very happy. After all, she was only a half-breed. Gela was displeased and considered it slander because she could not behave like that. The maid noted that although she was a half-breed, she was born into a good family, and it was happiness when a child was well-fed, even without working a day. The main character thought about how that maid would behave if she were in the child's place. The girl said that it was time for her to go and asked the little girl to be obedient, as she had been all week. These words surprised the child very much. She did not understand how the week had passed so quickly, and she was very surprised that she had behaved like an idiot for a whole week. The girl was simply shocked that all this week she just slept, ate, and pooped. She understood that her head was not working as well as before, and all this was because of this pacifier, which seemed to be made entirely of dirt. The thing was that last time she fell from the ska onto the floor. She started to stink, and it seemed like a mushroom had already grown on her. The main character remembered hearing that the body cleanses itself when mana circulates in it. Thanks to this, mages rarely get sick. However, there were cases when they died due to unsuccessful work with mana. The main character also had to be more careful. If the amount of mana in a young body increases sharply, the body will die instantly. Gela decided that she would continue to suck on the pacifier to concentrate, but it seemed to make her dull. Everything would be simpler if the main character had her former power. Gela had been building up her power for so long, and it was unclear how she could degrade so much. It was unbearable, and Gela decided that this time she would definitely wash this stinking pacifier in this damn mansion. From the bed to the door, then down the hallway, and without anyone getting in her way. Even a whole country couldn't stop a genius from the past, because her body just got smaller. Gela crawled along the stone path and for some reason thought that she would hurt herself. First of all, babies are not allowed to crawl on hard surfaces, but there is no greater humiliation than being born a bastard. A bastard is an illegitimate child. The main character assured herself that there was nothing to worry about. After all, she would become the most powerful sorceress, and the Iron Empire and the Clown Duchy would fall at the feet of the little girl. While Gela was in this body, nothing would change. The baby's nose went up on its own, and by the way, it was very tiny, which really amused Gela. The girl came to this garden to get to the pond and met no one along the way. It was beautiful and quiet there. The main character thought about going there regularly to wash her pacifier, and finally, a pond was visible in front of the baby. Gela sped up and decided to say goodbye to the stinky pacifier. The girl crawled up and was ready to wash the pacifier when she suddenly realized that she couldn't reach it. Gela didn't understand why her back didn't bend. She jokingly suggested that she didn't have a spine in her small body. The girl understood that if she leaned over, she would lose her balance and fall into the pond. The baby won't be able to concentrate in the water, which means she won't be able to use magic, and if she stays there a little longer, it will end badly. The main character understood that if she didn't come up with something, she would be walking around with a dirty pacifier again. The girl didn't understand what to do. Suddenly, the little girl remembered that if she couldn't do it sitting down, then nothing would stop her from doing it lying down. Gela praised herself for being so smart. It was a success, and the girl finally stuck the pacifier in the pond and began to rinse it there. When she pulled the pacifier out, she did not understand why she had not washed herself, assuming that she had so much dirt on it that it could not be washed off anymore. The pacifier looked cleaner, of course, but now it was like a weight off my soul. And suddenly the baby accidentally threw her pacifier up and it flew back. She was very scared. Gela started crawling after her pacifier. She started falling at someone's feet, but the little girl didn't notice because she was thinking only about her pacifier. In 1, 2, 3, the girl was already at the pacifier. Gela was glad she had made it. She remembered that a wise man had once said that if something lays on the ground for less than 3 seconds, it is not dirty yet. Everything was fine as the baby had time. Suddenly, she heard a sound. Turning back, she saw a boy in front of her asking her who she was. The boy was curious about this child. Gela looked at the stranger and thought about it, noticing that his face was quite familiar. His cold gaze and dark hair reminded her of something. That hair and that cold look were just like charant clowns. The boy folded his arms and told the little girl that if she was some distant relative, she couldn't come here. The main character was going over the thoughts in her head and remembered that she seemed to have heard from her father that Charant had a son. The boy leaned over and warned the child that if his father found out she was there, she would be in trouble. Gela noticed that the boy looked like his father, but his character was softer. If necessary, Charant will go even against his allies. That is why he was nicknamed the cold-blooded demon. He never deals with fools. But even if a person is smart, he must come from a noble family. Only those who meet his standards are honored with the privilege of being with him. He would despise even the great sorceress Gela if she were from an ordinary family. Now the little girl understood that it was he who had sent this demon servant to her, who had said that she had received a scolding from the air. The main character got goosebumps even from the thought that Charante could be her parent or relative. Gela was interested in what would become of this little Charant. The boy is about 5 years old, and at this age, children are especially picky. When Gela turns 5, she will be able to use lower-rank magic. Having mastered the spells of lower-level circles, the little girl will be able to quickly learn to use more advanced techniques, because the main character already knows them, so it will not be difficult to repeat them again. Gela decided that she would first learn how to create magic stones and other precious things. Thus, having provided for herself, Gela would be able to live peacefully alone. And then the girl will use magic, collect all the necessary information, and run away. The child decided that she would not pay attention to the boy and leave. The baby started to crawl away and was glad that she had picked up the pacifier according to the 3-second rule. but she still didn't like it anymore. So Gela decided to wash the pacifier again to get rid of the stench. The boy told the girl that she couldn't be there because her father didn't like little children. Gela noticed that he was quite annoying. The boy acted so innocently, although he was raised by such a cold-blooded father. The boy asked if she wanted to be banished. Last time, a maid who had entered her father's garden without his knowledge had had her tendons cut and then thrown out of the palace. Hela was shocked that Charant had done this just because she had wandered in there by accident. The main character didn't understand how this could happen. But it was obvious because Charente Clown is a crazy bastard, which is widely known even in Zolofia. Because of Charente, many avoided diplomatic meetings between the empires of Iron and Zolofia. Subordinates asked Gela not to take them to the next meeting. As soon as Charant opened his mouth, all the mages were speechless, so only Gela and the bastard Malen met him face to face. But the girl decided not to remember it, because it made her sad. The main character had to take revenge on Malen. This man is a flower grown by Gela. She has to cut it. The little girl decided that she would wipe the traitors off the face of the earth and take her place in the Tower of Magicians and win back half of the empire. Charant's son explained to Gela that she was still a stupid little girl and therefore did not know that his father was very, very scary. His father himself looked after the garden, so only the chosen ones could go there. Gela was surprised that this cold-blooded reptile was taking care of the garden. Despite her opinion, Gela still did not believe that Charant Clown was not capable of such a thing. The boy said that his mother liked this garden. The main character would not like to listen to his tearful story, because she is a baby and cannot even speak. Charant's son said that his father apparently did something called a divorce when he had a big fight with his mother. The little girl was not happy to hear this and tried to say in her baby voice that she did not even want to hear it. Moreover, she was not interested in hearing stories about Clon's failed marriage. The boy grimaced and timidly said that he loved his mommy. The baby sat down and, covering his face, sadly said that he wanted to see his mom. The baby did not understand why he was behaving like that, but he is the son of Charant Claude, and therefore an enemy of Zolofia, and there is no need to pity him. Gela thought that his father raised him strictly, but now it is clear that he did not. The main character didn't know how to calm the children down. Usually they don't feel better from her consolations. And saying that everything will be fine won't help in this case either. Gela was about to run away quickly so that the maids wouldn't catch her. The boy didn't understand where the child was running. He asked the little girl what she would do if she was caught. The girl assumed that her palms and knees should already be bruised, but she would still crawl a lot, so she had to be patient and get used to it. The baby wanted to find a way to crawl faster and with smaller plants when she grew up. Footsteps were heard heading towards the baby. The main character realized that someone was approaching and began to speed up. The girl understood that if she continued to crawl, she would be caught. So Gela lay down on the floor and, twisting to the side, climbed into the bushes. Pulling her head out of the bushes, the little girl began to look at who was going there. It was Charante Clown. The girl understood that if they caught her, it would be bad and her tendons would definitely be cut. The little girl decided to get out of here quickly. It was still a long way to Gel's room. The man in his thoughts now understood who dared to so fearlessly enter his garden. And the hooligan turned out to be that little girl. In her flows the blood of an unknown family. Not only Clown, Charant even thought about killing the girl. The man decided that he could justify himself by saying that he had killed the child by mistake because he had mistaken him for an intruder. But the man knew that his father wouldn't believe it, because his son couldn't kill someone by mistake with his intelligence. Father Charant wasn't a fool, but the garden still needs to be tidied up. Charenta turned to his son, Kaishan Clown. The boy froze in fear at first, then quickly stood up and apologized for coming here without permission. Charant said that there was nothing wrong with that, and that he could come because he was his father, and he had no reason to forbid his own son from doing so. The man noticed that the grass and soil were flattened as if something had fallen there. It looked like furrows. A furrow is a long groove on the surface of the soil used for planting, so Charant asked his son if he was the only one there. The boy said that there was another baby there. The young heir asked what the child was doing. Lost in thought, Charant saw that his Kaishan had red eyes and was apparently crying again, and most likely missed his mother very much. Kaishan said the child had washed the thing that is put in children's mouths. The man stroked his son's head and asked if the child had washed the pacifier, to which he was told that he most likely had. Charant smiled and told the boy that he could go now. But the boy was in no hurry to run away. He was trying to tell his father something, but the man did not understand what he was talking about. The kid asked with interest in his eyes if he would punish that child with exile. The man didn't answer and told the boy to go away quickly. He thought about how he hadn't raised his son to be so gentle and that he most likely took after his father. The young man was very surprised that the child had come all this way just to wash the pacifier, because it was quite a distance from the room to here. It couldn't be an accident, and it wasn't that simple. The next day, the baby greeted another lazy and smelly morning. The pacifier became much nicer after the baby washed it. Gela noticed that the maids were somehow delaying their food while she was doing exercises to develop her arms and legs. And suddenly, the girl wondered whether she had eaten at all yesterday, because she only remembered how she returned unnoticed. But she did not remember whether she was fed. The main character hoped that they had not decided to starve her, and even if the room was in the farthest corner of the castle, they should have arrived by now. Although the little girl behaved badly with the maids and returned with dirty clothes. But this was still no reason to leave the little girl alone and hungry. After some thought, Gela suggested that perhaps the maid had noticed her absence and was now taking revenge on her. But even if so, they don't want her to die of hunger, and a hunger strike is the worst punishment, after execution. The little girl sat in her bed and thought that perhaps this was Chiron's doing. After all, he might have noticed that she had snuck into his garden, and that's why he had ordered her not to be fed. Such things were quite in the style of that pathetic bastard, but how he dared to decide on the growing body of food was unclear. The little girl made a top of assholes, in which Chiron was in second place after villain. The main character hoped that even if the maid forgot about her, she would return soon and therefore decided that she should save her strength. Several hours later, no one came. Now the little girl was sure and had no more doubts that they were going to kill her. But Gela couldn't just give up and decided that she would succeed, because she had already been through this and wasn't going to die of hunger. Gela never thought that as a baby she would be on the verge of death. But it has happened to her before and she must cope. While her revenge is imperfect, she is ready to eat even grass to survive. First, the main character had to visit the garden of that scoundrel Chiron again. Last time, the little girl saw some berries there. She didn't know their name, but since they were berries, it meant they could be eaten. The little girl decided to try to do this, and if everything is okay, then she will drag a handful here. And if she can control mana better, then she will be able to pick fruits from the trees. But first she needs to solve the food issue. The girl's knees were already hurting a lot. They were all scratched. It was quite painful for her, but the little girl decided to pull herself together, because this training would help her become stronger. Even babies need to get bumps and bruises to develop. Gela supported herself and said that she could do everything, but she was still in pain, and so she began to think about visiting the kitchen instead of the garden. But she did not remember the plan of the mansion, but in principle, all palaces are similar. The kitchen is usually located closer to the exit on the first floor, and it is worth going to the corners at the end of the corridor. The baby already smelled the smell and understood that the kitchen was somewhere here. And now she had to try to open the doors. First, Gela had to look around, then fall on her back and raise her arms and legs and strain. After a little effort, the girl succeeded. But the little girl didn't even know what babies ate. She usually drank milk, but she already had front teeth, so she could chew fruit. Gela had 2 teeth on top and 1 on the bottom. When she walked into the kitchen, there was just a wonderful smell. Everything looked very tasty, and the girl was surprised that they were making soup. But she still couldn't eat hot soup because she didn't know how to do it yet. After looking around a bit, the girl noticed apples that were standing on the floor in a wooden box. The apples were hard, of course, but the little girl decided to throw them a couple of times and then they would become softer and there would be juice. Gela assumed that the cooks were on break and wouldn't see her use her mana. The main character lay down on the floor and began to push and managed to get a few apples. Well, no matter how you look at it, it would be hard for her to carry 2 apples. The little girl decided that she would tuck them under her clothes, but her arms are very weak, so she dropped one of the apples and it rolled away. The girl decided to try again and took the second apple, but it also fell and flew in the other direction. This made the girl very angry because her knees hurt a lot and it was difficult for her to move. Later, the girl came up with the idea of carrying an apple in her teeth. Since she needed to fill her stomach, there was nothing else to do. Gela came up with the idea of putting a pacifier on her fingers while her mouth was busy. The main task was to get there to the room, but suddenly the girl dropped an apple. She screamed because she was already very tired, and strong stress and anger at the apples helped her move a little further. The little girl concentrated mana in her front teeth, and thanks to this, the magic gathers in one point, and she can calmly carry the apple. Gela thought that by this time the maid would have already arrived, but everything was clear without that. Everything remained as it was, and no one entered the room, and so the first day of the main character's survival passed. 2 weeks later, the baby already had a lot of fruit in her room. It was very surprising that for 2 weeks no one even opened the door to her room. Even though the baby was an illegitimate child, the maids would not put the lives of the nobility at risk. If she were a simple child, she would have died already. No one had ever humiliated the great sorceress Gela like that, but now the main character had nothing to worry about because she had collected so much food that it would last for a long time. In addition to the fruit stolen from the kitchen, the girl picked leaves to put food on them. She was sitting in her room and decided that it was time for her to take a walk. Gela leads a healthy lifestyle to grow better, and daily walks are also necessary. So the girl breathes fresh air and at the same time can wash the pacifier. It was quiet again that day. The main character assumed that it was because of the blisters and bruises that her legs did not hurt so much. When she crawled on the floor for a long time. As expected, the baby would grow while moving forward. The main character arrived at the food warehouse. The girl stole vegetables and fruits from the Charente garden. There were edible plants in addition to decorative ones. After looking at the bush, the girl got very angry. The stems from which the main character collected leaves were cut off. Gela tried to do it unnoticed, but Charente saw everything. The sorceress understood that if she didn't stop, then that bastard Charente would definitely wring her neck for such walks in his garden. Suddenly, Gela heard a familiar cry. It was Charente's son. The boy was sitting crying behind his mother. This time, the main character ran into him again. The boy noticed the little girl and came up to ask what she was doing there. The main character simply pretended that she didn't know him and crawled off to do her business. The girl realized that she would have to abandon the idea of picking berries while the boy was here and just wash the pacifier. She crawled closer to the lake. Since then, Gela forgot the boy's name, but she remembered that he introduced himself. But she was sure that he was Charente Clown's son. But she still decided not to bother and just call him Charente's son. The little girl was very annoyed by this boy, and she tried not to turn around because she did not want to hear about Clown's broken marriage. The boy came closer and asked the little girl what she was doing. Gela, in turn, washed the pacifier and tried to make it clean. Keishan leaned over to the girl and asked her what she was doing here every day. This made the girl very angry, and she wanted him to leave as soon as possible. The boy offered his help and said that he could wash the pacifier himself. This offer was tempting, and the little girl decided that it would be bad for her if he did this, because her hands were already starting to hurt. There were only 2 more times to suck on it. And after that, the baby handed the pacifier over to Keishan. She decided to leave it with him for now. The boy tried to wash the pacifier and noticed that it was not washing well. The little girl looked at the boy with disdain because it was clear that she was not washing well because no one had washed her for years. If Gela had at least a little slime, she wouldn't suffer so much. And if you add a couple more ingredients, the slime could replace her pacifier, because slime has the ability to self-clean. Slime is much cleaner and more practical. The boy handed the pacifier to the baby and asked if this result would be okay. The baby thought he was just a crybaby, but it turned out that he can also be useful. Now the pacifier is clean, it is understandable, he is stronger, and it is easier for him to wash it. The boy lay down and stared at the baby. He was glad that he could help. Since the nipple was clean, it was time for the baby to crawl back. Children need regular rest. The boy noted that the baby couldn't come here all the time. The main character was very annoyed by Keishan's words. Today they didn't even manage to pick any fruit, so Gela would have to go back and sleep at the same time. Keishan decided to ask the child's name. The little girl ignored him and did not understand why he was following her, and why he was so persistent. She decided that she had had enough. Gela needed to tell him something to get him to leave her alone. A loud cry was heard. The main character was very surprised because this voice belonged to Griffin. She was very curious about what the griffin, the guardian of the Mediterranean ruins, was doing here. This beast, despite its size, hunts only small animals. Seeing this, Keishan was very surprised and asked who it was. This beast is especially attracted to small things that move, and so Gela began to hit the boy on his legs, thereby telling him to run away. The boy didn't understand what had happened and tried to ask the girl. The main character decided to forget about it because she had already done too much for him because of her principles. Suddenly, the voice of the head of the clown clan was heard. The man did not understand what was happening here and how Griffin appeared here. Deshar was furious, but the little girl decided that they were not stupid people and would figure it out themselves. Dechar did not understand where he came from, and the griffin's cry changed. It was the call of a predator. The griffin moved towards the boy, and Gela did not understand what the mages were doing in their tower because eliminating such monsters should be part of their duties. Suddenly, Sharante's voice was heard calling Keishan to him. The boy was delighted and ran to his father, who was standing with a spear in his hands. The man took the boy in his arms and said that everything was fine because his father was with him. The main character did not even think that this man had such a side. Sharant told his son to go to his grandfather. Gela had always known Sharante as a cold-blooded tyrant, but it turned out he had such a kind side for the family. The man stood in front of the griffin and said with a smile that it was common for worthless people like him to go astray. The little girl was behind the tree, and now she understood that the rumors about his strength were true. They said that he could masterfully handle any weapon, and there were also rumors that Sharant had found a powerful artifact in the ruins. The little girl decided to run away, because since he was here, she had nothing to fear. Meanwhile, Sharant began to attack the griffin. Deshar shouted that he was very interested in what the Tower of Magicians was doing, since they had most of the artifacts. Sharant stood up to catch his breath, and he noticed that the griffin seemed to be lost, having lost its master. By his master, he means the one who died, Gela. The little one's mouth tastes bitter from this fact. Since everyone was distracted by the griffin, it was easy to leave unnoticed. The main character was wondering why the mages weren't watching this. The griffin comes from the ruins, which are under the control of a magic tower. The fact that this beast is here means that the tower is in trouble. The girl thought that there are always guardian mages in the ruins and did not understand why this happened. The ruins exist, and no one knows how they appeared, and why and how they exist. However, the ruins here have existed since ancient times, as have the magical beasts that live there. The ruins contain objects known to all as artifacts. They are sources of powerful magic, and they are able to control people, as well as heal and cleanse and even curse. In addition, their owner becomes stronger, so many want to get at least one artifact. The problem is that to find the artifact you need to enter the ruins and then go down the endless stairs. On the way, you will meet many magical beasts, for example, that griffin. There are 7 currently known artifacts in the world. Compared to the fact that there are 37 ruins, the number is tiny. And the risks of death are high according to the victims. Therefore, no one should even think about artifacts if they do not have enough power. Currently, the magic tower has 3 artifacts. 2 of them are dark, and 1 is light. The little girl continued to move towards her room, thinking about the ruins. There were 2 predominant types of artifacts in them, which the little girl was well versed in, because she remembered everything from her past life. Light artifacts carry sacred energy, while dark ones contain the opposite, that is, evil energy. In the Iran Empire, there are only 2 light artifacts, and one of them is in the Clown Duchy. The other one is in the Imperial Palace. The 2 remaining artifacts are in a kingdom beyond the seas and an empire beyond the vast desert. The main character was shocked by how badly Malen controls the tower. Gele didn't understand why he killed her, because after her death he should have been able to rule normally. Girl was in no mood at all, so she decided to sleep and try to forget. But first she had to eat. Speaking of Shirente Clowna's son, Gela generously did him a favor, and he sat and just stared. But as soon as his father arrived, he immediately ran to him happily. The little girl was a little angry because he was very lucky because he has someone who can save his ass. But the little girl decided to quickly forget all this because for her, it was complete nonsense. Gela's knees hurt again. She didn't know what she would do if her legs gave out, but she decided not to think about the bad, because now she would finally eat all the fruit. The main character took the berries in her hands. They looked very appetizing. But her meal was interrupted by some scream, and she decided to look out the window. Not hearing anything, the little girl decided that most likely they were trying to subdue the griffin. The girl was not interested in what was happening there, because she was eating very tasty and sweet berries, which gave a refreshing effect. Suddenly, the room became dark, and the child did not understand why. Gela looked out the window and saw a griffin sitting on it. She heard screams that the beast was flying towards the mansion and was about to break in. The main character has come to terms with the fact that she is finished. Griffins are predators, and they do not distinguish between animals, magical beasts, and people. But they see perfectly and have a keen sense of smell, and they also adore the color red. They know that red symbolizes blood, sacrifice. And the baby looked delicious and was also a little red because of the berries. Gela decided that she needed to escape before he realized that she could become his lunch and just say goodbye to the life she had just received. The baby barely grabbed the pacifier, as the griffin had already broken into her room. She remembered that she had closed the door, which was very bad, but she could open it with mana. But her limit had been exhausted for today. But what's even more offensive is that Gela can't get into a pose to use mana, and it was hard to figure out what to do. From the main character's experience, griffins are cruel and barbarian-like. They torment the victim for a long time, playing with it, rolling it between their paws on the ground, giving hope to escape. And when the victim gets tired, the griffin slowly kills it. And the main character is not going to die so easily. So Gela needs to think about what she can do in this situation. The little girl knows many weaknesses of griffins, but she can't use any of them in the body of a child. Gela didn't understand why she needed this pacifier even when she was on the verge of death, and suddenly she had an idea. She decided that she should try to do something. Gela decided to try her luck. She didn't know if she would succeed, but the girl was sure that among the fruits she had collected, there were those very berries. The blue color means they are not ripe yet. So if you mix them with rose leaves, you will get a smell that griffins hate. They have a strong sense of smell, so the stench will weaken them for a while. The main character praised herself for having decided to steal a couple of leaves after this charant had angered her. And now Gela would mix them up and throw them into Griffin's face with magic. The girl believed that she would succeed, but there was one but. She did not know how to mix the ingredients. Gela could only use the basics of gravity magic. With its help, she closes the door. But mixing something is too difficult for the main character. Usually they mix with a stone, so the little girl started looking for something hard, like a stone. But there was nothing nearby. So Gela decided to use her magic. The girl tried hard to do something, but it sounded like rain. The main character thought she was getting the hang of it and tried to press on. There was still a little bit left, but the paw of the terrible beast was already behind the child. Gela instinctively knew that the stench of the berries was not enough to defeat him. The griffin was already ready to attack with his merciless claws. The little girl realized that she had gotten involved with the wrong guy, and that things would not be easy and very bad for her now. But suddenly the doors swung open. Shireena was standing outside the door, saying that the griffin was the most useless waste of his time. The man stuck his spear into the beast and it fell. The food that the little girl had been collecting with difficulty was scattered, and so Gela got upset. She grabbed a berry and threw it at the griffin, showing her displeasure. The main character was in complete shock that Charant Clown saved her ass. But because she couldn't do it herself, Gela felt worthless. The man looked at the little girl and called her a cockroach. The little girl, in turn, was angry because she would have to collect everything again. When Gela heard that Charante called her a cockroach, she was very angry because she didn't like it, and she didn't understand who allowed him to treat her like that. Deshar ran into the room. The man was calling Charant. But when he saw everything, he calmed down because his son took care of the griffin. Looking to the side, the man saw the same child and asked what she was doing here. Gela was outraged by such questions because it was obvious that she was here because this was her room. The main character's knees hurt terribly, but she had to collect all this suppressed food. She didn't understand why it was always like this. Gela remembered that she was still too small and she shouldn't have emotions and therefore shouldn't be upset. This stupid griffin brought a lot of negative emotions. The girl couldn't believe that he was doing the same thing that she usually did. The little girl didn't understand why they were staring at her like that, because she was on the verge of death, and it was expected that she would not be in the mood. The little girl was angry because she couldn't do anything and was scared. Deshar turned to Charant again and asked why the child was here, to which he received the answer that the man didn't know and didn't want to know because he didn't care about her. Deshar wondered why the room looked so sad. Charant noted that it looked that way because this was the room that Azatrora occupied. The little girl at that time simply said goodbye to her berries and other fruits, calling them her little leftovers because she valued them very much. The head of the clan was in complete shock and simply clutched his head. He asked where the maid who was supposed to look after the child was. He said that despite everything, she was still a child with clown blood in her veins and they were treating her like that. Dechar called Kant and ordered him to immediately make sure that the maid responsible for the baby was sent here. The man heard the order and began to carry it out. While the father was in complete shock, Charant tried to calm him down, saying that there was no need to be angry at innocent people. Deshard said that Velian was his son, and no matter how cruel Charant was, the baby was still his brother's child. So in his case, it was better to keep quiet. Charant looked at the berries, and the little girl began to think that he might have realized that she had been stealing berries from his garden. The little girl was worried, but the man simply turned and said that time moves forward and nothing lasts forever. That's why the father becomes weaker and softer every day. The little girl didn't want anyone to approach her because it scared her. Gela doesn't give up so easily, but she can't do anything because she ate all the berries in his garden. At least she ate well. And he won't forget such a nasty thing in his beloved garden. Charent said the little girl could make any excuse she wanted, but she was combing through other people's gardens and stealing berries. He didn't think that when she was caught, she would start hiding. Asked if he meant the strawberry gardens, Charanta said that if he was not mistaken, the child had become even smaller. Gela was very scared because she thought he wanted to grab her. The little girl decided that she could stand such a disgrace, and so she began to roll on the floor. The main character didn't know what to do and was already thinking about running away to another room. It would be great if it didn't have as many corners as this room. The little girl's knees were hurting terribly, and if that room was even worse than this one, she would never go anywhere. Charant asked the father what the child's name was. Desher lowered his eyes and said that he himself did not know. But he noticed that Velian told him, but he did not listen to him then. The main character was glad that the previous owner of this poor body no longer needed to listen to these cruel people, and Gela just wanted to rule the world. The main character doesn't need another name. After all, everyone in this world is alone. For someone to name the baby, she first needs to grow up healthy, and the baby should also take a bath. Gela decided to take a bath when Dechar Clown left. The baby crawled, and Dacre suddenly asked her where she was going. Gela was already fed up with everything and was only glad that Charente had left the door open and the girl would not have to waste her strength. But it was not to be. Many maids entered the room. Kant told the master that he had brought all the maids. Deshar was angry because he had told Kant to bring the responsible one, and he had brought too many. The man asked if he needed to repeat his order. All the maids were just shaking with fear and were very tense. The little girl was trying to crawl between their skirts to get to the exit. Deschard approached Kant and asked if he had appointed a personal maid. The man justified himself by saying that he had appointed a nanny, but she had quit in the middle of the workday, and it seemed that the other nanny was no better. This butler, Kant, looks calm, speaks without a drop of excitement. The little girl assumed that he had been working in the palace for a very long time and knew how to behave with the gentlemen, and most likely had already learned their reactions and how they would behave in a given situation. Considering that no strangers will enter this mansion, we can conclude that going out and coming back right now is not a very good idea, and it would be better for the baby to sit down and rest. The main character did not understand why Charante was staring at her like that. She wondered what he was thinking when he smiled like that and was again afraid that she would be killed again. Dechar asked the maids if anyone knew how the child had gotten all this stuff. The women said they knew nothing about it. The man was shocked and asked when was the last time someone had even shown interest in her. One said 6 months ago, another said 2 months ago, and the last one about a month ago. The main character didn't even know whether they wanted to repent or whether they didn't have the courage to lie, but they told the truth. In general, the main character was not very offended by the maids, because a person who is not able to survive in this harsh world is to blame himself, without the support of relatives or at least a grain of luck. Babies die and that's okay. Dechard shouted in anger and asked if they really meant that the last time they looked after a baby who had just learned to crawl was 2 weeks ago. The head of the family was very angry and asked if they were all crazy if they allowed themselves to do such a thing. The maids apologized and said that they had sinned greatly and assured the Duke that it was their fault. The little girl didn't understand why Deshar was making the situation so tense, because he had abandoned her too. After the Duke's questions, even Gela felt sorry for them. The main character was very hungry and blamed herself for not eating anything along the way. In general, with her baby teeth, the baby can't really eat. The little girl noticed the noise and looked at Dechar and assumed that he had hit someone. The Duke turned to Kant and said that he was the head butler of the mansion. But despite this, Kant does not fulfill his duties. The butler apologized and asked for forgiveness for the fact that he is indeed guilty, even though the little bastard whose name no one knows is a clown, and blue aristocratic blood flows through her veins. The man began to shout and ask what the child had been doing for the past 2 weeks. The baby has arms and legs, but no food. That's the whole answer. The baby decided not to miss the moment while Dechar Clown was here. Her palms and feet hurt like crazy, and it was already getting pretty annoying. The main character was already very hungry, and her clothes were dirty and it was very uncomfortable. Finally, the little girl got to the doors and was very happy to see the big world. But someone grabbed Gela. It was Charant. He caught the little girl. Deshard noticed. The little girl was very upset. They both irritated her. Deshard suggested that the child had found and eaten the food herself, as no one was watching her. Charant said that the little girl had been stealing fruit and seeds from his garden. This information surprised Deshard very much, and he asked Kant how old the child would be. Kant said that she had been here for about 11 months. The baby was rocking back and forth, and it really pissed her off because she wasn't some kind of bell that you could shake and pull. She didn't understand if you could shake babies. Gela was angry and decided that Charant was doing this on purpose and shaking her so that she would look at these maids and clown in such a pitiful state. Detcher thought about it when he heard that it was only 11. He asked Kant if he wanted to say that an 11-month-old child crawled out of the room on his own, picked some fruit, hid it, and ate it. The main character was very unhappy because their so-called fascinating conversation was very stressful, and they also behaved like that when they held her. Deshard noted that the child was quite smart and clever. The little girl, as always, was furious with everything. Charant put the child down, calling her a dirty creature. This made Gela very angry. The little girl decided again that she had to take revenge. Suddenly, Deshard leaned towards her and started to stretch out his hands. The main character decided that he wanted to kill her. The little girl was proud of her reflexes. The Duke noticed that this miracle child was fast. Deshard told Kant that they could not allow her to live in such conditions, so he must assign her a new room and several maids. Kant called Milady, Gela, into his arms. The girl was delighted, because if she were to cuddle properly in these palms, she would never have to worry about food again. But getting help from them was stupid for Gela. But now the main character had no choice. And it also seemed that Charant was not going to kill her. Gel hoped she didn't have to hug Kant. The most important thing was to make a cute face. She felt very comfortable when someone carried her in their arms. The little girl did not understand why Deshard was looking at her like that. She did not like it, and suddenly the little girl shouted the word, "Daddy," pointing in the direction where Deshard and Charant were standing. Deshard asked Kant what the child had said. The man said he wasn't sure, but if you listened closely, it sounded like the child had said, "Daddy." The little girl was very angry because she hadn't said that. She didn't understand how he heard that. How could a child, especially one so small, say that? Charant noted that he didn't know how his father heard it, but it seemed to him that it was some kind of curse word. Gela was happy because Charante was right and mentally praised the man. She hoped that now her daddy would stop looking at her like a piece of shit. None of the nobles knew or wanted to know the baby's name. Deshard turned to Kant and asked if he knew the baby's name. Kant said that her name was most likely Shireena. The baby was very sleepy, and maybe it was because today was a busy day. Her eyes were just stuck together. The pacifier fell on the floor and the baby didn't even notice it. Deshard noted that he hadn't even known that Velian's child had grown so much. After all, he himself had been a brat back then. Charant said that the baby was about 10 months old. Kaishan had grown in 5 years before they could even blink. Deshard had noticed it himself, but the baby had a bright head. To wander unattended and not die of hunger under such conditions is a very strong act and indicator, especially for a small child who is not even a year old. Deshard said that there were berries growing in the garden, and Charant confirmed this and added that the little girl had so tactlessly burst into his garden, picking berries and flowers along the way. Her hands were covered with calluses, and there was a wound from the thorns of a rose. The Duke's heir thought until the very end that her cleverness was just a coincidence, but did nothing, so he will ask his father not to yell at him. Charant kept wondering what the little girl was doing, but even after seeing her running away from him, he still couldn't put the puzzle together. Even if the little girl hadn't run away with the same enthusiasm, now Charant despises all the maids who don't know their duties because they knew there was a starving child in the mansion and his last name was Clown. The man was sure that Kant did not want the problems they could cause him, so he had to watch the maids more carefully. The man remembered the master's words. Charant told his father that he wanted to go to see Kaishan. He had been very worried lately and was constantly crying, so Charant would try to calm him down. Dechar ordered Kant to prepare a room and maids for the baby, as ordered. He also ordered a doctor to be called to check the child's condition and then come and report. This surprised Kant, and he asked again if a doctor was needed. Dechard confirmed this and asked if there were any problems. Kant lowered his head and promised that everything would be done. The baby was changed and slept soundly in her new crib. When she woke up, she decided to look around and saw a woman next to her who was waiting for the baby to wake up. Gela sucked her finger out of habit because she had lost the pacifier. The woman picked up the pacifier and told Milady that she had lost it. The pacifier was so dirty that the woman had to wash it several times. The pacifier was very old. The baby dropped her pacifier again while she was sleeping soundly. She couldn't even imagine that she could let it go. The great Gela, who has passed through fire and ice, almost never falls asleep. The little girl was happy because her pronunciation had improved. It was even better that way. The baby was wondering how old she was now. The woman looked at the baby with such pity that Gela felt uncomfortable. The woman started crying and took a handkerchief. She said that she was not her mother. This surprised the main character very much because she did not understand what she was talking about. The woman continued to cry and feel sorry for the child. The baby herself agreed with that because she couldn't even speak or do anything. The baby had a new and colorful cradle. It was even bigger than the previous one. The room was clean. The baby took out the pacifier and did not understand why she had the old pacifier. Gela didn't understand why they couldn't give her a new pacifier, even though she had such a fancy room. I bet the nanny didn't even change the spoons when they bent. The nanny said with a smile that she would have bought a new pacifier at the market, but Milady was no longer given money. And she cried again. The main character did not understand when the nanny would stop calling her Milady. It annoyed her because she didn't scream like Milady. The woman asked that the little girl let her know more often because if she was so quiet, she would think that something was wrong. By the way, the nanny added that her name was Cicely. But Gela didn't want to know her name and didn't understand why people in this house were saying things that the little girl didn't want to know. In short, the baby realized that the woman would not buy her a pacifier because they would not give her money. In theory, Gela had jewelry, and they were hidden somewhere near the emperor. There was a pact that when Gela died, all her treasures would go to Silopia. As a precaution, she hid several treasures, such as magic stones, around the world. The main character remembers that some of them are to Emperor Heron. The problem was that it would be difficult to get to him now. The little girl decided that she had to make this maid take her for a walk, because she had no money at all. The little girl shouted, "Market!" The nanny asked if Milady wanted to go to the market, which surprised the woman very much, because the child was only 12 months old, and she already knew what a market was and still wanted to go there. The baby was very happy that this woman understood her, but suddenly Gela thought about it. She was already 12 months old, which meant that she had spent a whole year just eating, sleeping, and playing. The woman said that if the little girl had not been forbidden to leave the territory, it would have been great to go to the market together. The main character again blamed Charente Claude for this prohibition. The woman said that it was truly a pity, and that it was not for nothing that they say that puppies are trained from birth. From that moment on, she would begin training Milady. The woman picked up the baby and said that they could buy a lot. There was a terrible smile on her face. And the baby herself noticed that something was wrong with the woman's eyes. Black magic requires emotional fuel, namely negative emotions, such as envy, anger, and greed. That's why the main character often interacted with many disgusting people. But the negative energy of this woman was just pouring out. It was absolutely not normal. The baby started screaming because she didn't like it. The woman simply put the pacifier in the baby's mouth and asked her to be quiet. The nanny called the baby a very difficult child. The baby could not take the pacifier out. The woman made a mechanism with the help of which the juice could not be reached, at least not by a child. It was held on a special wire, but to some extent it was good, because the baby can now do whatever she wants and not be afraid that the pacifier will fall out at some point. But with a pacifier, the baby won't be able to drink water or eat. The main character didn't want to die of hunger with a pacifier in her mouth. The woman looked at the baby with a murderous look and told her that today they would learn to be quiet, and she was sure that the baby would become the cutest puppy. Gela didn't like this expression towards herself. She didn't understand how this woman could treat her like that, calling her cute and also comparing her to a puppy. She thought that this woman was just crazy. The nanny said that she was the best in her field. The little girl was sarcastic because this woman didn't yet know what she could do. The little girl needed to get out of here quickly somehow. The little girl used mana and thus flew out of the room. She even opened the door for herself. The woman's face was indescribable. She stood in complete shock and did not understand what was happening. She could not utter a word, but her face changed in an instant. She became touched by the fact that her puppy could also fly. The little girl decided that she needed to run away to the garden. If the woman followed her and they were caught by Clown Charente, she would be punished. The man will be very angry and will decide that she no longer needs her legs since she dared to enter the garden without permission. Gela, when imagining this scene, gave Charente a hint and noted that the nanny no longer needs her head. Gela was very angry with Charente and did not understand where he found such a crazy nanny. The girl looked at the nanny's face and she felt very uncomfortable just from her appearance. She wanted the nanny to disappear. In Shireena's imaginary theater, the scene with the adoption of the nanny was terrible. Charente asked her to look after his puppy, and the woman praised him for such a wonderful choice and told him to rely on her. The girl thought that perhaps the man was taking revenge on her for ruining the garden. The girl ran away as fast as she could, but the woman easily caught up with her. The woman said with a smile that now Milady would step by step return to her room. Hella considered this unfair. This really infuriated her. The main character saw Charente Clown in front of her. She did not understand why exactly he and exactly here and now. The little girl decided to quickly run away. She turned the other way and started crawling. Gela didn't understand why he was walking towards her like that and smiling. She wanted him not to notice her. Gela didn't know what to do. On one side was this woman, and on the other was this Charente. She knew she would go crazy with these two. The little girl decided that she had to act right now, while the doors were open. Gela desperately hoped that she would have time to slip through the keyhole, but at the last moment, someone grabbed her. She really hoped that they would let her go and not let her be dragged back to her room. Charente's voice was heard, asking what the girl was doing in the hallway. Gela didn't understand who it was at first, but when she turned around, she realized it was Charente. Decher appeared near them. The girl was furious that they had such a gathering here. She was very sad that these two had caught her. Charente picked up the girl and hugged her. Gela didn't understand why he was holding her. Decher came closer and asked Charente what was going on. The baby was in tears. The nanny was in complete shock that the Duke and his son were there. Decher asked why the child was here and not in her room. The woman lowered her head and asked for forgiveness. She justified herself by saying that she had looked away from the baby for a second and she had already crawled out. Gela was shocked that this woman could talk like that and wished that they would not listen to this snake. The main character was upset that she would have to endure this crazy woman any longer. She was also very interested in the fact that Charente was still holding her in her arms. And indeed, a father once in a lifetime is a father forever. This was very hurtful to Gela's pride. Charente said that he was sure that he had ordered the nanny to take good care of the baby. The nanny was Baroness Sullivan. When Gela heard this, she was shocked that it was not just a nurse, but a baroness. Now the little girl had the idea that all the aristocrats in the empire were crazy. The baroness said that she remembered her duties perfectly and took excellent care of the child. The woman said that she looked after the girl almost constantly, but that this would not happen again. Judging by the nanny's expression, the girl understood that now she would not let her go anymore, even if the baby was dying. Now for the main character, life was so important. And pride, on the contrary. Gela decided to curse her and gain magical powers. You can cast a curse with black magic, but it takes a huge amount of mana. Knowing this, people still choose black magic, and it was not clear why they choose it. All magic comes from nature. The greater the source, the greater the power. And to use it, you need to train for a long time. But black magic was invented by people. Its source and power are evil intentions and grievances of people. Thanks to this, even without special abilities and intelligence, you can become a strong wizard. If a person can extract such energy, then he can use it. Even dogs can do it. Now, Gela is just a little girl who knows black magic. However, you have to pay for using black magic. And for using regular magic, too. The problem was that the main character had no idea what she would pay for. It would be good if Gela had the opportunity to learn black magic right after understanding the basics, but she doesn't know if this body can withstand the power of the curse. It was a big risk. But the main character decided that even though it was big, everything would be fine if she succeeded. And then Gela would receive very strong black magic. It will take the little girl some time to make a decision, but first she decided to try to cast a curse, and Gela will figure out the rest later. Charente noticed that sometimes this little girl seemed very curious to him. The child was very interested in why Charente smiled so much. The man stroked the girl's nose. The man asked her if she found all people funny, or just her family. The little girl had a gentle expression and a gentle voice. She was just a cutie. Charente Clown controls her emotions better than anyone else. The man asked if he imagined the baby laughing at them. His words were cold and sharp as ice. It seemed that Gela herself would not notice how she would kneel before this sweet and intoxicating voice. Meanwhile, the nanny pretended to be a poor thing and bowed her head in bewilderment, pretending that she was innocence itself. However, the main character knew for sure that if the devil existed, he was right in front of her. And his name was Charente Clown. He had a polite approach and a friendly attitude, and also a gentle, charming voice.